lot just happened in fantasy football in week 11, and it was arguably the biggest week of the entire season. And not only did it impact week 11, but it's going to matter for the rest of your fantasy season. So we're going to break down the most important takeaways from week 11 so you don't fall behind. And we'll start with Brock Purdy returning for the San Francisco 49ers, because really since week 2, since he first suffered the injuries that he was dealing with, he hasn't been out there as a full go. What happens in week 11 when Brock Purdy comes in? Well, the 49ers offense looks like the best offense in football, like it did for about a quarter and a half in week 1. Or one of the best offenses in football, because Purdy comes back, completes 19 of 26 passes, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. More importantly, though, in this game, the San Francisco 49ers, for them and their fan base, they win 41-22. It wasn't even this close. The Cardinals put up a couple of points in the fourth quarter. They put up 12 points in garbage time when the 49ers really aren't playing all that much defense. But more importantly, they were able to move the ball. And since they were able to move the ball, a lot of pieces for fantasy that were taken pretty high in drafts this year and that I liked, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Jauan Jennings, all these guys came through this week in one way or another. And that's going to happen when your quarterback has 133.5 pass rating with 3 touchdowns to no interceptions. And specifically in this game, the guys who really popped off, George Kittle, 6 catches, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns. George Kittle coming into the season that we talked about as in like the 4th or 5th round of your draft, depending on when you drafted, was arguably the best tight end value in all of fantasy since Deebo Samuel was gone and Brandon Ayuk had a pretty long recovery timeline. He's still not playing football. So now, since Kittle has played basically a game and a half with Purdy, he has this game of 6 catches, 67 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He has week 1 where he also found the end zone as well. Also in this game, Jauan Jennings had 4 catches for 54 yards. He continues to see a strong target share with the team high 6 targets. Also in this game, Christian McCaffrey, 5 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey on the ground, although he's losing carries. Brian Robinson had 8 compared to McCaffrey, just 13. He remains more efficient with over 6 yards per carry, multiple touchdowns. Also, Brian Robinson was seeing a lot of work in that fourth quarter of this game, where for some reason McCaffrey was still seeing touches on the final drive. So was Robinson as well. So sure, it's a 1-game sample, but man, you saw everything that makes Brock Purdy in this offense go. Brock Purdy is way more mobile. Brock Purdy just has a lot more tools to his game than Mac Jones, who by all accounts has been good as well, but it's a different dimension to this offense. Now, if we look at the 49ers offense specifically, and I want to call out another reason, because Ricky Pearsall also returned from a knee injury that's basically kept him out for a month and a half now, and Ricky Pearsall right away plays 41 snaps. He plays the same amount of snaps as Jauan Jennings. He basically is an every down player, running 23 routes compared to Jauan Jennings 24 and George Kittle 24. The only difference was Pearsall only sees 2 targets in this game. Now here's the thing. Ricky Pearsall has had some bigger games this year earlier in the season, but in those games, Mac Jones was the starting quarterback. Again, this is a 1-game sample. Pearsall was coming off of a pretty serious knee injury, so maybe he just needs some time to ramp up. But Ricky Pearsall was back as well in this offense, but it was still Jauan Jennings as the leading receiver with 5 targets. Still George Kittle heavily involved with 6 targets on a team high 24 routes. So a lot of moving pieces for the 49ers offense, but it was just helping the guys you would expect. McCaffrey, Kittle, and even the guy we've been saying to buy low, Jauan Jennings. So your takeaway here is that if you've held on to George Kittle, if you put him in your IR spot and now you're playing him, you probably have a top 3, if not higher, tight end rest of season, and Jauan Jennings still remains a buy low candidate, while Christian McCaffrey remains the number 1 player in fantasy football, and you could just feel better about that now heading into the fantasy postseason for all of your 49ers. Instead of potentially feeling worse and regretting the 49ers going from Mac Jones to Brock Purdy, we don't have to worry about any of that, and we also don't have to worry about TreVeyon Henderson losing a ton of touches probably when Ramondre Stevenson comes back, because the cat's already out of the bag with this one. TreVeyon Henderson has now delivered back-to-back breakout performances that a New England Patriots running back basically has not done in years. I'm literally talking years for just 1 game. Henderson's done it now in back-to-back games. And he did it just 4 days apart, because on Sunday in week 10, he has 14 carries, 147 yards, multiple explosive plays, multiple touchdowns. In that game, he goes out there, he's playing 83% of the snaps, 64% of the rush attempts, 72% of the routes run, but you could say Ramondre Stevenson is out, Terrell Jennings gets hurt during the game, they have nobody else to turn to, and it was just 1 game. Is it enough for TreVeyon Henderson, the rookie, to overtake the veteran Ramondre? Well, then 4 days later on Thursday Night Football in week 11, 19 carries, commands the backfield, just 3 for D'Ernest Johnson. No other running back sees a touch. 62 yards on the ground. Wasn't all that efficient, but he has 2 touchdowns, and more importantly, he adds 5 catches, 31 yards, another touchdown there. So 3 touchdowns in this game. He's getting you 24 touches. He's getting you another 100 total yard performance or so. And for back-to-back games, he was a key and really the key piece of this offense outside of like obviously Drake May and Stephon Diggs. And in that game in week 11 on Thursday night, he's coming out there and playing 58 of a possible 66 snaps. Workhorse usage for TreVeyon Henderson. I get it. Dearness Johnson was like signed off the practice squad. He wasn't on the team for all that long. But 58 out of 66 snaps is elite. Now, Ramondre Stevenson was practicing in limited fashion heading into Thursday Night Football. Now, with the mini bye of 10 days of rest, there's a pretty good chance that we're going to see Ramondre Stevenson play in week 12. The question now is how much usage does he take away from Henderson, who actually carved out a red zone and goal line role in week 11. I mean, it's definitely a good chance that Ramondre Stevenson comes in and starts to see some work. Like, I don't think we're going to see Henderson seeing 58 snaps to just 8 for Ramondre Stevenson. There's a chance it goes back to a split backfield, but that already is an improvement from what Henderson saw early on in the year. Henderson now has had 3 starts this year. In those starts, he's averaging 5.6 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns, 68 fantasy points. That's over 20 fantasy points per contest, compared to Ramondre Stevenson in his 8 starts, according to Underdog over on Twitter. He's only averaging 3.4 yards per carry. He only has 70.8 fantasy points, less than 10 fantasy points per game. So obviously fantasy points per game are not why Mike Vrabel and the Patriots coaching staff is going to give a running back more touches or not, but it obviously shows you the explosiveness and the playmaking ability of Henderson versus Ramondre. At the end of the day, your takeaway here is not only does TreVeyon Henderson look legit moving forward in the NFL, but right now he should be carving out a larger role in this offense, if not pushing aside Ramondre Stevenson, who probably still won't be 100% healthy even when he returns. But I will caveat all this by saying, I'm not against selling high on TreVeyon Henderson. We might talk about it later in the week, depending on the value that you get back for him. These are probably going to be his 2 best games, most likely of the season. If we're talking about multi-touchdown games with over 100 in total yards and Ramondre out, it could be worth seeing what the market looks like right now if people are going to overpay. The one thing that might make you pause, though, on that is the upcoming schedule. Matchups at Cincinnati and at New York, the Giants, are literally the 2 best matchups in fantasy football. Those teams allow the 2 most rushing yards per game this year to opposing running backs. It doesn't stop there. You get the Buffalo Bills, who have been a pretty hot or cold defense in the fantasy postseason. The Baltimore Ravens said you can run on this year. The New York Jets said you can run on this year. If you play until week 18, the Miami Dolphins. There are literally, out of these next 6 weeks of the regular season for the NFL, 5 of those matchups are against bottom 10 defenses, and like 4 of them are against bottom 5 defenses. So it's an unbelievable schedule. If you did want to hold TreVeyon Henderson, I don't blame you at all. All right, next up, we got to go to the Giants, because the Giants had a new quarterback this week, and it might only be 1 week because it was a concussion that kept Jackson Dart out, but it was Jameis Winston. There's a lot of hype going into this on how much he's going to sustain the passing attack here. But more importantly, yes, there was a new quarterback, but there was also a new coach, right? Kafka is the coach. He's taking over the interim head coach, calling plays, offensive coordinator, with Brian Daboll fired last week. So although we don't have the quarterback that will probably be there the rest of the season in Jackson Dart, we do have a new offense to see how it kind of rolled. So Isaiah Hodgins, he had to get signed to this team. He used to play on this team in the past with Darius Slayton out in this game and a bunch of different injuries. He actually led the team with 5 catches, 57 yards basically off the couch. Theo Johnson, 3 catches, 36 yards, continued to earn targets. Wan'Dale Robinson led the team. He didn't lead the team. 4 catches, 36 yards, didn't lead the team, but he led the team with 9 targets, lots of short area targets. So in the passing attack, nobody really did anything because they completely turned to the ground game. 38 rush attempts in this game for the New York Giants. 19 for Singletary, who looked good, almost 5 yards per touch. 19 for Tracy. 16 for Singletary, who, yeah, he had 16 carries. This was a split backfield on the ground. More importantly, Devin Singletary basically saw every single carry in the red zone. Literally, Tyron Tracy would have an amazing drive. He'd catch a pass for 20 yards on 3rd down, a key 3rd down. He'd then run for like 11, 7, 8. They would get to the 20-yard line, sub him out, put in Singletary the entire game. That's why Devin Singletary comes into this game, and he goes out there and he sees 2 touchdowns compared to 0 for Tyron Tracy. I will say, though, Tyron Tracy, what was maybe one of the best games of his career, not only did he have 19 carries, which is a large workload, right? He comes out here, he also has 4 catches, 51 yards. He comes out in this game and he's getting you like over 135 total yards. He's looking like a legit running back. He made multiple key plays on 3rd down, a 20-yard reception, I think a 14-yard reception to move the chains, breaking tackles in the backfield, all that. He looked awesome in this game. So when you try to look at like personnel groupings, it's a little bit tough with Darius Slayton and Jackson Dart hurt, but the one I want to really focus on is this backfield. Tyron Tracy, 37 snaps. Devin Singletary, 35 snaps. routes. They both run 15 routes. Tyrone Tracy earns more targets as a former wide receiver and better pass catcher, but this was a backfield that was legitimately split in terms of the snaps. Maybe part of this is because they ran so many plays in the red zone, and that led to Singletary getting more snaps. If we go down to player profile here, let's see if they have the running back splits. I don't think that they do, or this is a PFF. I don't think that they do, but if you watch the game at all, Singletary had all the 5-yard and inside the 5 and inside the 20-yard carries for the most part. But I will say Singletary is worth an add because of this. But Tyrone Tracy, probably a buy low. People are going to look at this and be like, oh, it's a complete split backfield. When one guy was on the field, and Tracy, way more efficient, was averaging 2 times the amount of yards per touch than Singletary, and is active in both the pass and rush game. You can see kind of just some stats here from Ryan Heath. He says Jameis Winston now has not thrown a touchdown 3 of his last 5 starts. Okay, that doesn't really matter, assuming Jackson Dart is back next week. But he says Tyrone Tracy still hasn't had a carry inside the 5-yard line all season. Singletary had 4 alone today, but both backs set season highs in weighted opportunities. So now in back-to-back games, by the way, Tyrone Tracy has now, in back-to-back games, set a new season high in carries and new season high in rushing yards and total yards. I think that's only going to continue, maybe not setting it every single week, but just being this involved in the offense moving forward due to all the injuries that the Giants are dealing with. The fact that Jackson Dart was told not to run as much should only help the running backs as well. And he just looked super good in this game and almost knocked off, as a big underdog at home, the Packers. I recently traded for Tyrone Tracy in the Flock League, and part of that is because what we're going to get in the fantasy postseason. Heading into the fantasy playoffs, you're going to get beneficial matchups against the Commanders, Vikings defense that has been hot or cold. But then in the fantasy postseason, a Raiders bottom 5 tackling team, a Cowboys bottom 5 overall run defense at home. These are the matchups that I like in Tyrone Tracy for a player who can be an RB2 for you down the stretch, or at worst a flex option.
Now, before we get into the next player, let me just ask you something. Can you relate to this? Like every Sunday in one of your group chats, somebody says, I knew that guy was going to go off. Well, why don't you prove it? Because now you can. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, and this is exactly where you could put your football knowledge to the test to actually cash out. All right, now here's how it works. All you have to do is pick more or less on player stats, whether it's passing yards, touchdowns, receptions, and when your calls are right, you cash out. It's pretty simple. There's no complicated rules. You have to combine at least 2 or more player stats together on DraftKings Pick 6, and then you just watch your players perform. Okay, now this next part is pretty huge, so make sure you pay attention. Because new DraftKings customers, when you play $5 or more, you get $50 in Pick 6 credit. So simply put, you play at least $5 if you're a new customer to DraftKings, and there'll be an extra $50 in credits in your Pick 6 account. Pretty cool. So to get in on the action, make sure you download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now using my promo code SAL. Ride the upside and let your picks do the talking for you. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Next up, I want to talk about Christian Watson, because this is a guy that we were telling you pretty much all the way back in August to spend your last pick in your draft on him, put him in your IR spot, and then you could pick up another player immediately, because he could be worth something down the road. He's been a good wide receiver in the NFL when healthy. And man, oh man, is that panning out right now, because the Packers are just dealing with so many injuries and just unreliable wide receivers going out there. Dontavian Wicks, even Romeo Doubs this past week with multiple drops. Watson in this game, by far their biggest playmaker, maybe at any position with Josh Jacobs hurt. 4 catches, 46 yards, multiple touchdowns in this game for Christian Watson. He goes out there, he has 5 targets, the second most on the team behind Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs is going to continue to be involved. He just has to, even though he had multiple key drops this past week. But outside of that, like, Jayden Reed is not expected back until at the earliest week 13. Tucker Kraft is done for the season. Dontavian Wicks did not look good in this game. They're literally bringing Bo Melton, who used to be a receiver, then became a cornerback. Now is back to a wide receiver out there on the field because they need wide receiver health. Watson is showing a pulse and that he can actually catch the ball and make big plays right now. I think that's going to lead to more plays for him moving forward, especially if he keeps making plays like this one. You definitely saw it if you watched football at all on Sunday. I will not play it, unfortunately, because we've gotten too many hits from copyright, but I can just drag it along like this for you just to see that, yeah, Christian Watson is down there somewhere, basically double coverage, but a spot where only his wide receiver can make the catch. And Christian Watson, a player who struggled with drops during his rookie season, really has not struggled with drops since then, makes the catch for his second touchdown in this game. His first touchdown was also crazy from Malik Willis, the backup quarterback who had to come in for a couple of plays with Jordan Love's shoulder banged up. It didn't even look like the ball was supposed to go to him, and he still makes an incredible catch. In this game, more importantly now, Christian Watson's usage since recovering from his knee injury and returning a couple weeks ago has been trending up. And in this game, he officially, for the first time this year, played more snaps than anybody on the team. 43 snaps
snaps out of a possible 55 in this game. He goes out there and, like we said, he's running a team high 24 routes. The fact that there's no more Tucker Kraft and now it's Luke Musgrave, who they clearly don't start because they benched him. He only played 19 snaps compared to John Fitzpatrick, who is not much of a pass catcher, playing 35 snaps. Like, the Packers offense is falling apart. They need Jayden Reed back immediately, as soon as possible, if they want any hope at moving the ball. But in terms of big plays right now, sure, when Romeo Doubs catches the ball, it will be him sometimes, but it's going to be Christian Watt, number one on this team, Watson, especially with Josh Jacobs also hurt. And down the stretch, he has some nice matchups. I mean, you're looking at multiple matchups against the Bears secondary that is arguably the worst in the league, including one in the fantasy postseason on December 20th, and then December 28th at home against a Ravens secondary that, although that Ravens defense is getting healthier and they look good this past weekend, albeit against Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, it is still a secondary that even when at full strength, you can still target this year. And speaking of targeting this year, hopefully you did that with Woody Marks earlier in the season on the waiver wire or as a buy low like we talked about last week, because he didn't have another blow up, like he didn't have this blow up box score this past week, so maybe you could even continue to buy low on him. But everything is confirming that he is the full on workhorse in this backfield now for 2 straight weeks. 18 carries, just 2.4 yards per carry. That's kind of sad, especially in a good matchup against the Titans. But 18 carries, just 3 for Nick Chubb. And the earlier or the later we get in the season, the worse it's going to get for the veteran running back Nick Chubb, who already does not look all that great when he gets carries in games. You scroll down, Woody Marks also adds a reception in this game as well. 7 yards goes for there. So you're getting 19 total touches in this game. What does that lead to overall in terms of his usage? He handled 66% of the snaps and 79% of the backfield opportunities. And this was a game that was a closer game script, right? If we talk about last week, Woody Marks saw 78% of the snaps, 70% of the rush attempts, 55% of the routes run, but that was in a game where the Texans were trailing by multiple scores against the Jaguars and had to come from behind in the fourth quarter, pause, and win that game. So overall, like, this was a situation that you could say, oh, it was just a game script. That's why Nick Chubb wasn't involved. Even though we knew it wasn't, Woody Marks started that game, saw the first couple of drives of that game. But this past week in a much closer game, that was 16-13, that for most of this game at halftime, it was 3-0, that the Texans at best were leading this game 10-6, I believe. Like, this was a close game the entire time, and they still leaned on Woody Marks. Doesn't look like Joe Mixon is coming back this year. Doesn't look like Nick Chubb is going to regain this backfield. Rest of season, this should be Woody Marks' backfield, and that matters. That matters because this is a guy who is efficient on the ground, can pass protect. That's why he's earning a larger role. But more importantly, for your fantasy leagues, this is a guy who all he does is catch passes. In college specifically, 83 catches in a season is insane for any position, let alone a running back. Then 48, insane for a running back. 23 is above average for a running back, and 47. This is a guy who had over 200 college catches, and now you're going to put him into a Texans offense that probably most weeks is going to be in trailing game scripts when they're not facing the worst team in football, like this past week when you saw them go up against the Tennessee Titans. If we look ahead at their schedule, next week at home, or Thursday Night Football, it is at home against the Bills, probably going to be trailing. Against the Colts, a good offense, probably going to be trailing. Against the Chiefs, probably going to be trailing. Even against the Chargers in the fantasy playoffs, probably going to be trailing. And then they get great matchups against a bad Cardinals defense, bad Raiders defense. So like rest of season, Woody Marks either has good matchups on the ground or matchups where his team should be trailing and he could probably earn 4 or 5 receptions. So I think my takeaway right now, and we'll talk about maybe later in the week, is to continue to buy low on Woody Marks. Now the next offense I want to talk about is the Carolina Panthers, led by Bryce Young, because this past week the Carolina Panthers offense, oh boy, did it go off. On the back of 31 of 45 from Bryce Young, 448 yards from Bryce Young. He averaged 10 yards per completion or per attempt in this game, 3 touchdowns as well. All of this despite being sacked like 5 times in this game, despite constantly facing pressure. And the Carolina Panthers, they're now 6-5. They beat the Atlanta Falcons 30-27 on the back of Bryce Young and on the back of this passing attack. Multiple pass catchers got involved, but nobody got more involved than the top 10 overall pick, Tetairoa McMillan, who for the most part this year, week in and week out, has been consistent. He's like consistently earned, I don't know, a 25% target share. Some weeks he looks good out there for like 60 to 70 yards. He just never put it all together because Bryce Young was never putting it all together or healthy. But man, did that change this past week. 8 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, the breakout game of all breakout games, over 30 points for the top 10 overall pick, Tetairoa McMillan. He looked like Drake London out there. He looked like at times Mike Evans out there, the guys that he was compared to coming into the league. But it wasn't just him. I mean, you count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different receivers when your quarterback is throwing for 450 yards go for at least 50 yards in this game. Xavier Legette has another nice game. He's had a few of those this year, by far having a better season this year, despite dealing with injuries. 4 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Rico Dowdle got activated not as a runner in this game, but as a receiver for 5 catches for 55 yards, and the best game of Jalen Coker's season, although a lot of it was dealt with injuries, 4 catches for 52 yards. So the Panthers offense comes alive in this game. Now, part of the stuff I want to call out here is that on the opposing side of this, the Falcons, a defense that looked like one of the best defenses in football the first month of the season, whether it's on the ground or in the air right now, doesn't look like that good of a defense anymore. But specifically for Tetairoa McMillan, the buy low window has officially closed. If you bought low on him, if you've had him on your bench and you've been stashing him, don't do that anymore. Have him in your roster. Tetairoa McMillan, he set a career high in receiving yards, 130 today or on Sunday, but he had 4 red zone targets and 36 fantasy points. But really nothing changed for his role. He saw a 27% target share. It just happened to be, compared to a 25% target share for his season average, it just happened to be a game where his quarterback goes off. So there is like a world where you say, okay, I bought low on Tetairoa McMillan. Let's play the game now. The buy low, sell high. Do I sell high? As always, I'll say, see what the offer is out there. If you could swap a Tetairoa McMillan for like a top 25 overall player, so like maybe a Jalen Waddle at this point, I don't think it's a terrible idea, especially with Waddle going on bye. Maybe you can get him for a little bit cheaper. Not a terrible idea, but depends on your offer. Rest of season for the Panthers, they're going to be in some favorable spots here in terms of game script. Like next week against the 49ers banged up defense, they might play from behind, especially with Brock Purdy back. Against the Rams, they likely will play from behind. That's a tougher matchup. But then you start to head into the fantasy postseason. You get matchups against the Saints heading in. 2 matchups against the Buccaneers is awesome. That Buccaneers defense has not looked good all year. The bad thing, though, would be at home against the Seahawks on December 28th in the fantasy postseason. But outside of that, probably going to get some trailing game scripts so you can see some more targets for Tetairoa McMillan. All right, next up, we got to talk about the Commanders' backfield because early in the day on Sunday in Madrid, Spain, the overseas Europe game, this backfield completely changed. It had been, for the most part, the past, 2 months, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt usually getting like a dozen carries per game, and guys like Jeremy McNichols and Chris Rodriguez filtering in. This past week, though, Dan Quinn, the head coach of the Commanders, in a press conference said that they were actually going to lean on Chris Rodriguez. Now, we didn't know what that meant, but normally means he's going to see most of the work, if not all of it. But that kind of felt strange because why is Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt all of a sudden not being involved? Well, simply put, it might be because he just hasn't been good. Because in this game, Merritt still was involved. Krosky-Merritt, 9 carries, 28 yards. But once again, he just wasn't good. 3 yards per carry compared to Chris Rodriguez, who quietly at this point in his career, the former Kentucky running back in college, he's always been efficient. 15 carries, 79 yards, 5.3 yards per attempt. He also adds in this game a reception for 6 yards. So you're seeing 16 total touches in this game for him. You're still getting a double-digit touches, 10 touches for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but Chris Rodriguez was clearly the better back, and he was the back who was involved way more. According to PFF, Chris Rodriguez comes into this game, and they do lean on him. He plays a team-high 30 snaps out of 67, 18 for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, 17 for Jeremy McNichols. I'm going to be honest. Chris Rodriguez is indeed worth a waiver wire ad after seeing 16 carries, after being highly efficient, and maybe Jaden Daniels, if this team can win some games, comes back, although I'm skeptical. But man, if 3 running backs are still seeing 17 snaps at least in this game, 3 running backs are seeing at least 4 carries and targets in this game, like what is really the upside for Chris Rodriguez? Like this past week is probably the upside. Ideally, he finds the end zone moving forward, but let's just break it down right here. If we look at what this backfield was looking like, according to PFF, Chris Rodriguez, he's getting all the short yardage work. He's this light blue color right here. He's getting most of the early down and goal line work, so that's all good as well. But when you look at Jeremy McNichols, he's the light green. 100%, all 7 snaps in the 2-minute offense, 6 out of 7 snaps on third down, and then you're basically getting Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt just splitting some early down carries. So Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt's role is pointless now. He's not getting goal line work. He's not getting passing down work. Jeremy McNichols, though, is seeing all the passing down and third down work, which really hurts the upside of Chris Rodriguez. It's just a messy backfield. Sure, you could probably add Chris Rodriguez. He's going to be a priority at this point in the season, getting that many carries and looking that good, but I don't really know if there's that much upside on it. To kind of put a pin on this, you can see right here the Commanders' backfield, according to Ryan Heath, meaningfully shifted toward Chris Rodriguez. He hit a season-high 53% of the backfield carries, while Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt fell to 32%, his lowest since before the Eckler injury. Now, if we were to look at this rest of season, matchups against the Broncos coming up, not great. The Vikings, hit or miss, not great. Then you get some nice matchups heading into the fantasy postseason with the Giants and the Cowboys, but multiple matchups against the Eagles in there. So I'm a little bit concerned. Like outside of that week 16 matchup, I believe against the Dallas Cowboys in the fantasy postseason, where you could probably put him in your flex spot if you're in a bind. I don't really know where you're starting Chris Rodriguez outside of maybe week 14 if you got like McCaffrey and Tyron Tracy on bye. All right, we've talked about a bunch of players in this video, and a lot of them could be potentially waiver ads because of all the stuff that just happened in week 11. So if you want to see for free my #1 waiver ad at every single position, you can check it out now with the link in the description below or by heading to waiverwins.com. That takes you you to this page. You just enter your email right here. Once you enter your email, I then send you the #1 waiver ad at every single position, not just for this week, but rest of the season. It'll take you to this page where it just tells you a little bit about what to expect, tells you that it's basically going to go in your email now. And more importantly, right here, if you don't find the email in your inbox in the next couple of minutes, please check your spam and also check your promotional folders as well. It should be in there within like 1 to 3 minutes. If you don't see it after like 5, check your spam and promotional folders. That is waiverwins.com. Link in the description below. Next up, you got to talk about the guy who arguably had the best game of definitely his season, but of the entire week. This past week, we'll talk about another guy who had an impressive week, but that's Sean Tucker at the running back position, because this has been building for a couple of weeks now. Kind of in the background, they've been saying they want to get Sean Tucker more involved since Bucky Irving has been hurt. He's been seeing more carries. He scored a touchdown last week as well. I tried to get him in the flock league on the waivers, but Zach bid more money than me. I put 2, he put 6. Anyways, my regrets are still there, not going higher after this past week. Sean Tucker goes 19 carries, 106 yards, 5.6 yards per touch, 2 rushing touchdowns. Let's not stop there. Let's add 34 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in this game as well. Sean Tucker had 135 yards, 3 touchdowns in this game. He's scoring like 35 fantasy points. He looks so explosive after contact. It looked a lot like that game against the Saints last year when he ended up going out there with Bucky Irving when Rachaad White was injured and he took over that game. Now, overall in this game, Rachaad White still started and played more snaps. He played 43 of 71 snaps, but it really happened like in the second quarter. Sean Tucker had his first long touchdown run down the right sideline, and since that point moving forward, they gave Sean Tucker a lot more work. He finished the game with 31 of a possible 71 snaps, but he commanded a lot of the second half touches in this game. Overall, when you look at it at the end of the day, he actually led the team with 19 carries compared to just 10 for Rachaad White, who Rachaad White actually looked efficient in this game as well, over 5 yards per carry after not looking all that efficient lately. So this is something that's important. Sean Tucker is definitely worth a waiver wire ad now, because at very worst, even if Bucky Irving was to return from his injury in week 12, which is no guarantee, it looks like Sean Tucker could be covering out the backup role behind a running back who's been banged up with multiple injuries this year. Here's Ryan Heath just talking about it. He said, after Sean Tucker ripped off a 43-yard touchdown in the second quarter, he outtouched Rachaad White 12-2 in the second half. He easily set a season high in carry share at 67 or 66% in this game. Now, obviously, the one caveat, Bucky Irving with his foot and shoulder injuries was seen practicing on Wednesday in limited fashion. He ended up closing the week in limited fashion, but he didn't play. He was ruled out yet again. So obviously, normally when you get 3 limited fashions in a row, limited participants at least for practice, you're usually suiting up. Seems like this injury is not yet 100% healed, so there's a chance that Sean Tucker could start in week 12. Rest of season schedule, but more importantly, next week the schedule against the Rams, not a good matchup at all for Sean Tucker if he did have to play. But then after that, you're getting some nice spots. The Cardinals at home, the Saints at home. You're also getting the Falcons at home. And then in the fantasy postseason, you look at the Panthers and the Dolphins. Like the final 5 to 6 matchups of the season for this Bucs team are awesome, whether that's Bucky Irving coming back from injury or Sean Tucker. And when Bucky Irving comes back, he'll probably be somewhat limited after missing the past 2 months of the season. So I do expect Tucker to be involved and at very worst be a top handcuff in fantasy. So he'll be worth an ad for sure. All right, the next situation we have to look at is the Denver Broncos backfield, because this was a changing backfield as well, with J.K. Dobbins ruled out for the season just days before this game, and a lot of expectations was that R.J. Harvey was going to command the backfield in this one, and Tyler Bidet and Jaleel McLaughlin would maybe be involved a little bit, but not a ton. What did we get in this game? 11 carries for R.J. Harvey, 30 yards. 6 carries for Jaleel McLaughlin, so no carries for Tyler Beatty. So in some ways, R.J. Harvey, who saw almost double the amount of carries in this game, did command the backfield. But early on in this game, it was like a 50-50 split for the first half. You scroll down here, R.J. Harvey, where he contributes probably most as a dynamic player, 3 catches for 20 yards in this game as a receiver. Jaleel McLaughlin only had 1 catch, -5 yards. So overall, the touch counts, 12 for R.J. Harvey, 7 for Jaleel McLaughlin. Maybe you were expecting a little bit more, but it was a difficult matchup against the Chiefs, which the Broncos actually pulled that game off. Pretty good game. But this is where things get really interesting, was just the overall usage when you actually break it down. 38 out of a possible 62 snaps for R.J. Harvey, over 60% of the snaps, easily a season high. No other running back saw more than 8. 8 snaps for Jaleel McLaughlin, 8 snaps for Tyler Bidet in this game. So yeah, overall, like even though the box score just shows you 12 carries for, or 11 carries for 30 yards doesn't look great, and 6 carries for McLaughlin only played 8 snaps in this game. So easily RJ Harvey was on the field the most. He just didn't get a ton of plays from that. But if that continues, if he remains on the field, the back that they trust, he's going to keep seeing more than just 12 touches like he did this past week. You can see the backfield breakdown right here. According to Ryan Heath, he says RJ Harvey had 65% of the carries, 8% of the targets, 68% of the backfield opportunities compared to Jaleel McLaughlin, who did get 2 out of the 3 carries inside the 10-yard line. So that is a little bit concerning. But overall, the profile for RJ Harvey, who's averaging over 5 yards per touch this season, the rookie that they spent significant draft capital on in the second round, we're probably going to get to see that the rest of the season moving forward, because this game is an indication, if you're playing nearly 70% of the snaps, that you're probably the guy now in the backfield as we expect. And probably a decent buy low candidate after this past week only having, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 fantasy points. Amazing matchups coming up. Matchups against the Commanders, matchups against the Raiders, matchups against the Jaguars. And oh yeah, Packers defense that just got smashed by both Devin Singletary and Tyron Tracy on the ground. These matchups are going to be great. The one downside for this backfield, though, is that in the fantasy postseason, the Chiefs, the Chargers, not great matchups by any means, but hopefully by that point he has a more solidified role, especially as a pass catcher. Now, earlier I mentioned Sean Tucker was like the guy who was maybe the highlight of the entire weekend in fantasy, but there's one other player who would like to rival that outside of your obvious, like, Christian McCaffreys and obvious names that are popping off every single week. And that new name and that new face has to do with the wide receiver core from the Arizona Cardinals. It is this first game with Marvin Harrison out. That's why this is a takeaway. This was going to be a takeaway either way to see what the wide receiver target share looked like with not only Marvin Harrison out, but also Zay Jones, because earlier this season when Marvin Harrison was out, Zay Jones led the team in catches, targets, and receiving yards amongst all positions. So both of those guys are now out. So what does this wide receiver room look like when it's led by Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, and obviously tight end Trey McBride? Let's take a look at it. Oh my goodness, 15 catches, 185 yards for Michael Wilson, who in this game gets 18 targets. I mean, Jamar Chase level production is what you're getting here. If you remember Jamar Chase's first couple of games with Joe Flacco, every single target. I mean, I was watching this game, then I went on a walk around halftime, and I come out in the second half, and I'm looking at my phone on updates, trying to watch like the quad box on your phone, which is just a terrible experience. It's like impossible. But I'm trying to look at the stats. Every single stat is like, oh yeah, 7-yard catch to incomplete pass to Michael Wilson. Jacoby Brissett was just hammering targets to Michael Wilson, especially in garbage time in the fourth quarter of that game. Both Michael Wilson and Trey McBride got there, and it's because they were down big. We showed the score earlier. The 49ers ended up winning 41-22, but that also includes 12 points from the Cardinals in the fourth quarter during garbage time. So they were just running the ball, moving the ball downfield. But the important takeaway here is that, I mean, Jacoby Brissett is going to be the starter on this team for probably the rest of the season, it seems like. I know they said 6 to 8 weeks. That means basically the rest of the season. This past game, 47 of 57 passes completed, 452 yards. Like, this guy is going to chuck the ball, especially how bad their defense is. And it seems like for the time being, Michael Wilson, 15 catches, and obviously Trey McBride, 10, and maybe even Greg Dortch, 6 for 66 and a last-second touchdown in garbage time could be worth a waiver ad for you. But this is important. I mean, Marvin Harrison, in his absence, Wilson put up 185 receiving yards and a 32% target share. Marvin Harrison has only exceeded a 30% target share twice in his career and hasn't had 100 yards in a single game this season. Look, I know Marvin Harrison has some lovers and he has a lot of haters out there and he's been inconsistent. Some of it is his fault, some of it's not. Michael Wilson literally just did something Marvin Harrison has never done in his first game. Maybe it's a coincidence, but Michael Wilson is a good wide receiver. It's not like this is some random receiver who came out of nowhere. No, this is a legitimate X-wide receiver, 6'1", 216 pounds. In his past seasons in the NFL, when he's had to compete with guys like Marvin Harrison like last year, he still had 47 catches for 548 yards in a bad offense led by Kyler Murray. In college, he came out, he kind of had like a medical condition coming out of Stanford, so he fell a little bit in the draft. You can see here he never put up major production because of his health. He only had like 418 yards, his highest total in his final 3 years, but he only played 4 in 6 games. Like, he missed so much time in college. He missed like 70% of his games his final 3 years, which is why he fell in the drafts. Not a lot of people trusted him as a prospect. Probably would have been a second-round pick by most people's standards, went in the late 3rd round because of these health issues. But now we're getting to see the dude break out, and it's awesome. And here's the thing, Marvin Harrison, he didn't play in week 11 because he underwent surgery for appendicitis. There's a chance that he misses future weeks as well moving forward, is what they were saying. And if that's the case, Michael Wilson probably has to be the top waiver ad behind Emmanuel Wilson and Christian Watson this week. The schedule right now, Jaguars, awesome schedule. Tampa Bay Bucks, awesome schedule coming up. In the fantasy postseason, matchups against the Falcons defense that has looked bad, and the Bengals defense, yeah. I know Michael Wilson, by the time he has that matchup in week 16 against the Bengals, probably at that point, Marvin Harrison will come back and the target shares will get a little bit more separated. But it looks like Jacoby Brissett likes throwing way more to Michael Wilson on this one game sample than he ever did Marvin Harrison. All right, so these are the key takeaways and the most important takeaways from week 11 fantasy football and how they're going to help you not only in week 12, but the rest of the season moving forward. You got to know this information, and now that you do, before your friends, you're going to have all the ability in the world to smack them around. Now, on Tuesday this week, the waiver wire video will pop up right here once it's ready. Be sure to check it out, and also be sure to subscribe. Make sure you double check that you're subscribed. We are less than 1,000 subscribers away from 200,000. That's a major goal of mine, so I appreciate you you all a ton in advance, and I'll see you all in the next one.